Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Uncle Matt again, and that is the recipe on the screen for mince pies, as promised. Hello, welcome back to Uncle Matt's cookery lessons. I've just made these mince pies, and if you watch this video, I'm going to show you how I made them. I've made the mince meat, I've made the really crumbly, buttery, short crust pastry, and yeah, I'm feeling very Christmassy. For a chunky chap like me, you've got an excuse, it's Christmas, I can eat as many of these as I want. Oh god, they're absolutely delicious. So anyway, if you want to see how to make them, watch this video. I hope you really enjoy it. Thank you everyone. Recently come on board and subscribe. I know you came via my bread and butter pudding recipe, but honestly, really grateful for it. It's quite exciting actually. Anyway, so loads more videos to come. Maybe one or two more Christmassy ones. We'll see what I can get around to. But anyway, I'll see you soon. Oh. So while you see me adding ingredients into a bowl, a little history of the humble mince pie. So everyone knows it today as being a fruity pie with spices in a sweet short crust pastry and a bit of beef suet or vegetable suet, but it dates way back to the times of the Crusades, and the returning Crusaders from the Holy Land came back and they loved the sort of style of Middle Eastern cookery using meat, spices and fruit and sweetness together. So that's how this came about. The earliest origins of it, probably in actually printed, would have been around about the 1600s, and you'd have seen things like mutton pie with fruit and spices, and that's pretty much the beginnings of this wonderful, very popular pie that we only really seem to have at Christmas time. But do you know what? I'd be quite happy to have them all year round. Absolutely delightful. Anyway, history lesson over. What you see me doing there, I've added in the fruit juice. I just used a fork there to stop the pips going in. And so many of these ingredients are interchangeable. You can really put your own style on this. You can use whatever dried fruits you like. I like to add a bit of fresh apple. I don't know why I did that. I thought that looked quite cool. But no, I'm sure it doesn't. Peeling the apples, then I decided, do I want to grate them, or do I want to dramatically chop one in half for effect on the video? So I went for obviously the dramatic choppy. Just hack it up nice and small. Don't worry about the finesse of this. Well, it will become apparent when it's all mixed together. That is some nice good quality vanilla bean paste. Feel free to omit that. And that is orange blossom water. So if you've had rose water, which goes in the Turkish delight, that is the orange equivalent. And I just thought, yes, that's going in my mince pies. Tiny bit of it, because it's very powerful. Use restraint when you're using that. So this is basically, that's all the ingredients combined of this mincemeat, and it doesn't look anything like the mincemeat you bought in a shop, right? Which is very wet and syrupy. So that is going to have now 2 to 3 days resting in my fridge. Now, if you're going to jar this up and not make the pies now, sterilise your jars, put it in there, a little bit of paper on top, and they'll keep for months, probably years, to be honest with you. But you know, I'm not going to be responsible for anyone getting ill. So this is a couple of days later. I'm making the pastry. Cold butter, dicing it up, adding it into the sugar and the flour, and this is a very buttery pastry. This is normally a pastry would be like half fat to flour. This is, I think, about, like, if you did the equation, it'd be like 75%, something like that. I'm breaking all the pieces down, coating them in the flour, and then the whole lot's gone in the fridge for at least 20 minutes to chill down. The blade in my blender here has been in the freezer. I don't want to get the heat from my hands into this pastry at all. I want a really short, crumbly pastry, and the less heat you introduce to it at this stage, the better. So that's had probably about 30 to 45 seconds, and this might take it up to about a minute. Having it on high speed, and where you can see that's the consistency we're after. That butter is completely incorporated, sort of breadcrumby. for this recipe, 1 egg. And I think the egg is important with pastry, otherwise you end up like with more like a biscuit consistency. And here's when I'm going to add some cold water, and I say some, you've got to use your eyes and your judgment here. So I'll put on the screen there, that's approximately 75ml or 2.5 fluid ounces. Give that about 20 seconds, don't over mix it now. This is crucial, you don't mix this too long. You can see here, I'm going to try to demonstrate, I'll get a bit, and you can see when I sort of push it together, it goes together. So I'm thinking, yes, that is going to work, that is going to be my dough. I've got some water to the side if I need it. And as I say, if you make your pastry a bit too wet, you can add a bit more flour, or when you're rolling it out, just use extra flour. So this is the only time I'm really adding the heat to it from the palms of my hands. For not very long, I decided it needed a little bit more water to come together. Otherwise, when you roll this, if it's too dry, it's just going to break up and you won't be able to get a nice even roll. So there you go, I'm thinking that is good. I'm very happy. I've only worked that for 30 seconds or so when it's been out from the blender. Wrap that in cling film, get that bit that you've left. There you go, pop that in there, and that's going back into the fridge to rest at least half an hour. I've just put the measurements of the size of, if you want to call this a Yorkshire pudding tin or a muffin tin. So they were basically 7 centimetres across, those wells. I don't know what the depth was, but this is what I decided to go for. And I had to go and buy that. I got my old Yorkshire pudding one, and it was a bit mucky, and I thought I can't use that in the video. That'll be embarrassing. Right, so that's had a good half an hour. I thought, well, let's work with a quarter of it to start with and see how we go. So the recipe at the beginning says this makes 12 to 14. I actually got 2 dozen. I got 24 mince pies. That you might not be able to make the pastry go as far as I did, but with the filling and the pastry, I got 24 mince pies. I was very pleased with myself. And yes, I'm still having them every day. And Eugene, if you watch this, I'll have some with me at work today. So rolling out the pastry, going to around about 3 millimeters in thickness. And the trick for rolling pastry is you roll a bit, you give it like a quarter turn, you roll it a bit more, you give it a quarter turn, and as you need to, because this is a very, very high butter pastry, you are going to have to use a bit more flour than you normally would use. And that there pile of flour is just for my cutter. So that's the largest ring I had. It's 9 centimeters, 3.5 inches, and it was just about the right size for my muffin tins, which was actually a stroke of luck, because if it didn't work, I didn't know what I was going to do. Now, actually, I do know what to do. If it is a bit small, roll your pastry a little bit thicker than I did, and when you form it in there, you can sort of use your fingers and thumbs to raise it up the sides, if that makes any sense. Here's another camera angle, because I think it looks pretty cool. I think it's time I got a new rolling pin. That one is a bit small. And here I go, just cutting some more, and I think, no, let's get it in that corner there. But I'm using my re-rolls, but I'm only using them once. Okay, so you've got your trimmings there, you can put that back together if you need to. Damp hands, because the flour's changed the consistency of it, that's fine. But as I say, it's a high butter content one, so that came back together nice and easy. And that cutter, I didn't measure that one, but basically you take a smaller cutter and you offer it up to the top of the holes, and you make sure it's just going to fit inside there neatly. And here I am putting, so that is a chilled buttered muffin tin or Yorkshire pudding tin, and I'm just very carefully forming them in there, very gently. Be as delicate as you possibly can. Try to make sure you push them right the way down into the sort of the corners, if you like. I know there's no corners, it's round, but you know what I mean. Push it all the way down there so it doesn't tear when it bakes, but also the other advantage is the mincemeat is going to help push it down as well. So that is how it's changed. You see the consistency of that? That has had 3 days actually in the fridge, and for me it's just about spot on. It's still nowhere near as wet as the stuff you buy in the shop. If you do buy the stuff in the shop and make your own pastry, that's absolutely fine, but you might want to add either some ground almond or a few breadcrumbs, plus, you know, pimp it up with a few more apples and things like that to get your consistency more like mine, because it will be a much nicer mince pie. You'll get a lot less leakage and your pies will be fuller. And here I am adding the tops on. I'm not being too pedantic about this. As I say, I'm not really a pastry chef, so this is a regular sort of kitchen chef doing his impression of pastry, and I'm sure there are pastry chefs, the chef de pâtissier out there. Damien, my old mate, if you watch this, I'm sure you'll be horrified. But I think most people will say, do you know what, I think these mince pies are absolutely tremendous. I'm just using a fork to press the sides of the pastry together, and then also stab a couple of holes in the top to let some steam come out so they don't puff up and separate. Egg wash the tops, but be really careful. Try not to egg wash the point where the pastry meets the rim, because that's going to want to stick. Okay, you want to get these out at the end. So I've preheated my oven to 190 degrees. That was probably after about 10 to 15 minutes. Give them a half turn. And basically, you're baking these until they look nice and golden brown, right? And that's the point, when they look lovely. Now, this is just after they've been cooked. They're unbelievably delicate, but I just couldn't wait. I wanted to show you what they look like when they're piping hot, though. The pastry is soft at that stage, so my recommendation to you is leave them in there until they're just warm, and they will come out much more easily. But don't let them go cold, because then they'll want to stay in there. So here we go. Are they nice? Oh. Is the pastry crunchy? Is it ever? And are they nice and full? See that? See the difference? That, ladies and gentlemen, is, I just think, the best mince pie I've ever had. And I've never made them before. This is another first for me. And I'm thrilled. So this episode of Uncle Matt's Cookery Lessons is over. Thank you ever so much. It's so nice to have so many more people here now. And I'll try to get another one done before Christmas. But if I don't, have an absolutely wonderful time. And I'll catch you soon. Bye then.